All right, good afternoon. This meeting of the Sacramento Metropolitan Cable Commission is videotaped in its entirety and will be cablecast without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the government affairs channel on the Sacramento cable system. Today's meeting is being cablecast live and will be repeated Saturday at 1 p.m. A VHS copy is also available for checkout from any branch library. Members of the audience wishing to address the Commission should fill out a speaker identification form located on the back table and give it to the secretary at the front dais here. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the Commission and state your name for the record. So, we should call the roll and see who's here.
Cox.
Aye.
Pratt.
Here.
Castanis.
Here.
Collin.
Here.
Yee.
Here.
Toby Johnson. Dickinson.
Here.
Panay.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Item 1. The Secretary read.
Awards and recognitions.
All right. Why don't we have Access Sacramento come up first? I believe Ron Cooper is here for that. And we should have the award somewhere. Right here.
Ron Cooper, Executive Director of Access Sacramento. First, I'd like to extend the apologies of Bill White, our chair of our board, who was unfortunately called away due to a personal emergency in the last half hour. He and, lucky for us, we'd planned ahead for all types of situations here. With us today is also our vice chair, Reggie Turan, who will come down and introduce the producers, and we have some plaques of recognition to extend to them today. Reggie?
Thank you. The contest of this year's included the Hometown Video Awards, the Bay Area Cable Excellence Awards, and the first annual Jewish Awards. The Hometown Video Awards entertained 1,800 entries in 37 categories. Since the award's inception in 1988, Sacramento producers have garnered winners each year, and Access Sacramento boasts overall excellence in public access in both 1988 and 1991. The Bay Area Cable Excellence Awards, also known as BASE, receive several hundred community video entries this year throughout Northern California. The Jewish Video Competition, sponsored by the Judah L. Magnus Museum in Berkeley, California, considered over more than 100 entries. The Sacramento winner is Les Fink for his production, The Keeping Quilt, which is a past winner of the Hometown Video Awards. Introducing the Sacramento winners is the Cable Commission Chair, Josh Panay.
Panay. Down
And once again, Access Sacramento wants to thank, on behalf of all Sacramento County residents, for the resources provided through the Commission and through Sacramento Cable that results in the award-winning programming today. So we have our plaques, and if we could have the Alaron.
All right. Why don't we have our plaques up? We have 5 awards to give out today. Dixie Palaron, how are you?
Fine.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
We're pleased to. Congratulations, and on behalf of the Commission, and we award you with this, and hope you'll always do good work, and we're looking forward to more from you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next, we have Michael Stokes. Michael here.
Michael was winner in the Best Issue coverage of the BASE Awards. Next, we'll have John Webb, winner of the Hometown Awards for Professional, Promotional, and Informational categories on behalf of the County Education for All People.
How are you?
Hi.
Congratulations on behalf of the Commission. We look forward to seeing more of your good work.
Thank you.
Congratulations, John. That's great.
Next, we have Joyce Christensen.
And Joyce won overall excellence musical introduction.
Thank you. Hi, how are you, Joyce? Good to see you. Well, congratulations Obviously, I know a lot about your program and look forward to more winning ways. Thanks.
Nice.
Les Fink for winning honorable mention for Jewish video competition. Congratulations.
Thank you very
Les.
much.
Look forward to more work from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you, members of the commission.
Okay.
We have a video to show, too.
We have a video. All right. Shall we show that and... Better start with a cartoon.
No such luck.
Of the programs that you just honored, that we assembled about 3 minutes of highlights. Thank you.
It's a neat title.
Peterson there.
Access Sacramento producers recently garnered several awards for excellent TV production. In Hawaii, Sacramento producers did it again. They won 3 awards at the 17th Annual Alliance for Community Media Hometown USA Video Festival. Of the 1,800 entries received from the United States, Guam, and Canada, 110 were winners.
Hi, I'm Sam Duman. I'm in the ROP radio and TV program. This is one of the studios we train in. We're not just learning about TV from a book, we're doing it.
Among the winners was Sacramento's John Webb. You are watching Get Ready for the Real World, a 9.5-minute video produced by Webb. This promotional won Best Informational, and a cut of it won Best PSA in the national contest of locally produced videos.
In ROP, learning means putting classroom knowledge and job experience together, and that equals a competitive edge when it's time to take a sharp turn onto the main drag of life.
It made me want to go to school more because I'm not just sitting there in the 6th, 7th classes and listening to teachers. I can actually do what I want to do.
This symphonic Christmas program also won a National Hometown Award. The Sacramento production by Dixie Palaron won Best Religion Video. In a regional contest, Joyce Christensen received an Overall Excellence Award for her musical introduction to What If. She also reached the finals for 2 What If programs.
Oh yeah. What?
Also winning at the Bay Area Cable Excellence Awards was Michael Stokes for Best Issue Coverage in New Jack News.
All your soul, all your strength, people of the air, fight no time.
It's nice.
That was very good. Well, thank you very much. You can obviously see why these are winners. We appreciate all your good work. Thank you. Next, we have a presentation. Darby Patterson, you want to come up, Darby? We have a presentation from the Commission, a resolution, and maybe you can just recap again for the Commission and the audience, Darby, of this great work.
All right, just sort of capsulizing, we had a couple of employees that were involved in some outstanding rescues over the last month or so. They were both involved in seeing accidents happen, cars bursting into flames. They both separately went and rescued people out of the cars before they were actually engulfed and swept in flames. As a matter of fact, one of the things I forgot to mention to you last time was the gentleman who's not here, Gary Voris, was getting this woman out of the car as the dashboard was kind of collapsing down on her foot, and he was pulling her out. And when he got out, he looked down at himself, and his shoes had melted, and there was steam coming up from the soles of his brand new shoes, and that was his little moment of personal drama there. And our other gentleman, Frank Lugo, rescued 2 young children, age 3 and age 8, out of a burning car, and we're very, very proud of them both.
Frank is here.
Frank is here.
Well, Frank, on behalf of the Commission, we would like to recognize you for this act of heroism and appreciate what you do on a daily basis at Sacramento Cable, but also appreciate you going the extra mile for the rest of the community in this way. So we want to present that to you, and thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay. Item 2.
Notice public hearing, basic service tier rate determinations pursuant to the Cable Act of 1992.
Okay. We shall open the hearing, and Mr. Espasto.
Mr. Chairman, members, good afternoon. Report before you, I'd like to break my comments down in several areas and then call on Jay Smith to assist. To begin with, recall that today's meeting was essentially called for the purpose of reviewing the filings by Sacramento Cable. These filings were submitted last Monday. The report before you didn't exist this morning, so I know you have not had a chance to read it since it's presented to you on the dais today. But it's important that we go through this methodically so that all the aspects can come forward. I'd like to begin with some historical perspective on where we are and where the entire cable regulatory process is relative to rates, put on the record the procedures and process we use to get where we are today. Then I'd like to have Jay Smith, your financial consultant, describe to you his findings as a result of the last 2 days intensive effort. Then I'll come back and try and bring his findings into perspective and recommendations for you. I'll begin by saying the cooperation from Sacramento Cable has been exemplary. Jay and Kevin Jones, Sac Cable's controller, have virtually been together for the last 48 hours. Actually, we're probably running more like 64 hours now. Several late nights, etc. We began this process last Monday with Sac Cable's filing. We staffed FedExed it to Mr. Smith at his office. He came back the same day with a list of questions to Sacramento Cable, both of which are included as attachments in your package. You'll see it was a substantial filing. You'll see that the questions that we came back with last Tuesday were substantial as well. It was agreed and that Sac Cable would immediately begin pulling the supporting material for the questions that Mr. Smith had. We arranged and met at Sacramento Cable first thing Tuesday morning, and that's where we've been going ever since. At my request and in analyzing Sacramento Cable's filings, I had Jay place emphasis on those factors which generated the biggest bottom line result. Different than we had in the first go around with the FCC filings, these the filings were made on spreadsheets generated by the FCC. So Sac Cable provided us with working disks, and then we could immediately begin to look at sensitive areas. So moving in out of page 3 of my staff report, I'll point out that the tests that Mr. Smith conducted, among others, are listed before you. And we, again at my request, put our emphasis on those issues and those factors which we thought had the most interest and meaningfulness for us. We met yesterday about midday and presented to Sacramento Cable, to Kevin Jones and to Wayne Val, General Manager of Sac Cable, our preliminary findings, and then spent most of the rest of the day going back and forth in the analytical process of resolving those. with that, I'd like to have Jay now present to you a summary of his findings. That is included before you with the yellow post-it, the yellow tab, is what Jay will be using to summarize the findings he has. I'll comment also that I recommended to you, and you agreed in March, that we took a comprehensive approach to this process. That is, the FCC divided its regulation implementation into two phases, two aspects, two different sets of forms. The Form 393 series, which began last October and ended in May of this year, and then the Form 1200 series. The reason we're meeting today is that your authority to make decisions on the 393 series ends on the 31st of August, and that was the reason for this particular time frame. But the recommendations and the analysis that I've done and that you will see as we move forward this afternoon encompasses both aspects. I chose not to deal in little pieces, and I'll explain the reasons why as we get further in, of this order or this action and back and forth. We tried to take a comprehensive approach, primarily because I thought that was what was easiest and most reasonable for consumers. What we learned last year was that consumer confusion about cable rates triggers very easily. So with that, Jay, if you would take us through your findings, would be appreciated. This is Jay Smith. As some of you recall, Jay was our consultant on the franchise analysis now some 11, 12 years ago.
Some of the faces are familiar. I'm Jay Smith. I'm president of a consulting firm, Public Knowledge, Inc., in Portland, Oregon, but I have spent time in Sacramento before. Hope to again. I'm wondering if I can have whoever in the back room does the magic with the overhead give me the overhead. Is that all I need to do? Just ask for that?
Yes.
Smile, Gene.
Smile.
Meanwhile,
It works quicker for some people than others, we've discovered.
What does it depend on?
Your smile.
I don't know, Dave, didn't it depend on whether they carry the gun or not?
What was the verb? No, what was that?
You also have in your packet at a yellow tab a copy of the same one page, and I'm going to be speaking just solely from this page. Looks like I need to move it a little bit anyway. This more or less summarizes our findings for both the review of the Form 393 and the review of the Form 1200. As Rich mentioned, the rate regulation process in the last year has gone through sort of two iterations. There was a filing called a Form 393 that came in last fall, and that governed rates between the period of September 1st, 1993 and July 15th of this year. And then starting July 15th of this year, there's a revised set of rules and a new set of forms called the Form 1200, Form 1205 to 1200 series, and that governs rates from July 15th forward. With respect to the Form 393, our review of that really addresses the issue of whether there are any refunds owed to subscribers for that period of time. And then with respect to the Form 1200, it addresses both the question of whether there are any refunds retroactive back to July 15th, but also the issue of what rates are the proper rates to set prospectively going forward. The top of the page reports the results of the Form 393, and just to kind of orient you a little further to this, there's a column that relates to basic cable rates. There's a column that relates to installation and equipment rates. As a local franchise authority, you have the authority to regulate both of those, basic rates and equipment installation rates. And so there's a subtotal column that represents the number within your local regulatory authority. Then there's a column entitled CPS. That stands for Cable Programming Service Rates. That's the upper tier of service regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. No one regulates the rates for pay services or pay-per-view services, neither you nor the Federal Communications Commission. And then there's a total column which totals both the rates that are within local authority and the rates that are within FCC authority. These numbers are in thousands, and related to the 393 here, basically what it indicates is that the form filed by Sacramento Cable reported maximum permitted rates following the instructions, completing out the form. The maximum permitted rates calculated on the form were somewhat slightly higher are slightly lower, than the actual rates that Sacramento Cable was choosing in that historical period back to September 1st, 1993. So these adjustments would simply represent adjusting Sacramento Cable's rates for that historical period to the maximum permitted rates that were calculated on the form included in their own submission. We did not make any further adjustments to that. So that's all those numbers represent. Then going forward, we're looking at the Form 1200, and that's really where we spent most of our time in the past few days. The Form 1200, again, governs rates from July 15th of this year forward. Here, we made several adjustments. The one that really has the greatest dollar impact, although it falls really in the domain of the Federal Communications Commission primarily, is an adjustment in the count of remote converters used on the form. I don't know how to convey to you simply what this process is all about here, but there's a very complex formula that the FCC has come up with where there are a number of variables that end up determining the maximum permitted rates. And they based their formula on a survey of rates they had done about 2 years ago. And they surveyed rates, and they determined through some mathematical analysis of that survey data that there were relationships between rates and certain other factors. Factors such as the number of subscribers, the number of additional outlets, and many factors. One of those factors was the number of remote control units rented in the system. We have adjusted the count of remote control units that Sacramento Cable used. They disagree with our adjustment. The adjustment has the effect of actually slightly increasing the maximum permitted basic rate, but contributing to a $669,000 decrease in the cable programming service tier rate. Similar to on the 393, the rates that Sacramento Cable is actually now charging are slightly higher than the maximum permitted rates the company itself calculated on the form, and that's this line again, limit to maximum permitted rates. If one simply adjusted their rates to what they reported on the form, there would be an adjustment along the lines shown here on this particular line. Another small adjustment that we made, which I believe Sacramento Cable agrees to, at least in concept, is that they included some commercial additional outlet revenue in their rate calculation. The more equipment or installation revenue they report, basically, the higher their maximum permitted rate comes out. Because this was commercial revenue, we believe it should be excluded from the calculation, and that exclusion has the effect shown on this line related to commercial additional outlet revenue. Finally, subscriber counts have something to do with the determination of the maximum permitted rate. This is a little bit of a complicated issue to explain, but there are different ways to count subscribers. And in particular for bulk contracts, if you just count the bulk contract, that counts as only one. But there may be 100 subscribers receiving service under that bulk contract, so you could potentially count 100. At the same time, bulk contracts are typically discounted from the normal rates, and so there's a way of equivalizing the bulk subscribers to normal subscribers by dividing the revenue by subscriber count, and that would come out someplace between 1 and 100 in the example that I gave. Sacramento Cable has used an equivalent count, again in my example the number coming out someplace between 1 and 100, whereas following my example we believe they should have used the number corresponding to 100. They should have used a somewhat higher number. We don't agree on that. We made the adjustment. It has the small effect shown here on the form, or on the summary page. Finally, there were several other adjustments we made, which I believe Sacramento Cable agrees to, which essentially have no real impact on the bottom line results. So the real sum total is shown on the reduction total line. I'd emphasize that only a small portion of that is really relates to the rates in your jurisdiction. $100,000 on basic rates, really nothing on equipment and installation. The bulk of it is on the cable programming service tier, which is under the direct jurisdiction of the FCC. I would just say, I think I'll say one final thing, then maybe answer any questions you have, and then I think Rich will follow up on what I've had to say. This has been a very The FCC rules are very complex, and it's a very confusing process for everybody, for the cable operator, for you as a commission, for your staff, and for everyone involved. It's kind of like somebody invented the income tax for the first time and distributed the forms, and now suddenly everyone has to understand how to fill out the forms correctly without a lot of guidance or help. I will say to you that the overall scope of the adjustments we made here are really quite small in relation to the total dollars involved in a cable television situation. The Sacramento Cable does appear to have made a very sincere effort to fill out the forms correctly. The kinds of adjustments we're making are not surprising given the kind of situation we're in. There's reasonable room for disagreement on some of the adjustments, and so I want to convey that the process, I think, has been a trying one, but one where everyone has tried to do their best, and there hasn't been any willful deceit or misrepresentation or anything like that. They've been very open in providing records and giving us access and providing time to meet with us over the last several days.
Okay.
I have just one question.
Thank you. Mr. Stannis.
What, the bottom line, and what is the $992,000 figure then?
If all of these adjustments were upheld, including those under the jurisdiction of the FCC, where most of the number resides, there would be a refund to subscribers for the period between July 15th to whenever the FCC really ultimately acted on this, and then a prospective rate reduction to their next filing, and that refund would be equivalent to $992,000 for a one-year period.
And then that would be divided it'd be divided and sent back to each subscriber, is that correct?
Yes, typically the operator would have some latitude on how to do the refund for the refund portion, but typically they would make one lump sum adjustment on a bill. If you consider here that there are 200,000 subscribers, that only a portion of this would be refunded because presumably something would happen before the end of the year, the actual adjustment per subscriber would not be a particularly huge number.
So it really is just a penalty or a fee paid by the cable operator to the tune of almost $1 million.
It'd be a combination in this case, depending on when they acted, of a penalty, a refund penalty, plus a prospective rate reduction.
Thank you.
I think it's important to clarify that if the cable operator noticed this today and changed their rates, then these numbers wouldn't apply. So it's a prospective calculation. I asked Jay to bring everything to annual dollars for purposes of comparison, but we're looking forward, and it hasn't happened yet, relative to the Form 1200 numbers.
Well, that begs the next question, and that is the potential rate reduction that the company had agreed to earlier on. Has that been considered in this calculation or not?
Yes.
It has?
Yes.
So even with that rate reduction, there is still this, the factor of this $992,000.
Right. This is our analysis, and be sure I've got this right, Jay, relative to the rates that Sacramento Cable put into effect on July 15th, noticed us upon on June 14th. So this looks at what actually exists right now and compares against that. The rate reduction, the rate changes. In this case, there were not many reductions because of other factors. They went up slightly. Right. Are in effect.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Yee.
Yeah, Rich, do I hear that Sac Cable and the Cable Commission now, there's no disagreement as to these numbers?
Let's take, how we set this process up is Jay is the auditor, is the analyst, and he has reported out his findings. He's commented that under the Form 1200, Sacramento Cable has agreed to that adjustment. And then I like to take it analytically and go through the differences and the factors. To answer your question specifically, I'll be recommending that we only continue to pursue the adjustment remote count, the remote control count adjustment. I feel the others are not significant.
So what does that amount to as far as per subscriber?
We're jumping ahead a bit, but we're looking in the range of 25 to 30 cents per month. That's correct. But as Jay pointed out, and I want to get into a little more depth, that is a decision that only the FCC can make. It is outside of your jurisdiction.
The last question is that is Sac Cable working with the Cable Commission in trying to make this come to a conclusion?
Absolutely. This list yesterday at noon was 4 to 5 times longer. Good. And these gentlemen worked late last night and early this morning together, side by side, 2 computers going, to bring it down to these to what I will show you is really one open issue. And when Kevin or Penny come forward, I believe they will say that they agree that we really only have one significant open issue. We've narrowed this from many issues down to one. On a handshake, very easy, very courteous, very professional.
Good.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission?
Just a comment.
Yes, Mayor.
This is certainly better than fighting side by side, I must say, working side by side.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the commission? All right. Why don't we go into testimony? If we could please have Sacramento Cable come forward. Would they like to come forward?
We may want to get into the analytical and recommendations first, and then invite Sac Cable's comments if you'd like.
Let's move through that then.
Taking now Jay's recommendations or Jay's findings, and let me see how I can take this into perspective for you. I'll be speaking from page 5 of the staff report presented to you earlier. First off, as he pointed down below, and Sacramento Cable has agreed, we've made or recommending several ministerial changes to the filings. One of the reasons this is important is that these forms become the foundation and the reference point for future rate increases. So we have agreed to make adjustments in this process for ministerial things. And I've also asked in my recommended final resolution that as we find other ministerial changes, those things which do not impact the current rate subscribers pays, we'd be allowed to make those adjustments to the base as well. This will be a document that, when it's finally solidified, we'll be referring to back and forth over time. Some of the things we've seen have been, as Jay mentioned, the difficulty in agreeing on counting subscribers. So we think we have that one all fixed now. All the subscriber counts fit what the FCC intended. Some other ones are some open points from the FCC. Did that mean a monthly average here or an annual average? And as we figure those out and plug them in, we intend to hope to be able to do that. Moving on now, let me explain to you how I looked at these and how I took it. At the bottom of page 5, I've presented to you what I think that some factors are that are important to apply in my recommendations and hopefully in your decision making. First, the amount of the potential dollar refund to subscribers I felt was worth considering, given the cost of implementation and the confusion to subscribers that can follow through. There's a subscriber base in excess of $200,000. So as I developed my thinking, I looked at factors which would be greater than 50 cents rebate or refund over an entire year. That was one factor that I used in my consideration. I also looked at factors in going back to the ability of applying a sensitivity analysis within the spreadsheets. I looked at hardening up those factors which had the biggest impact. I commented on this as I opened my remarks. And third, I think a very important point to show what Sac Cable has done that really falls outside of the direct filings of the forms in front of us, but one that influences my consideration is this. In early June, as Sacramento Cable looked at making its rate changes pursuant to the new FCC rules, we met and talked about all the different things that were happening. One option that Sacramento Cable had was to, at that time, that is as of the July date, increase the cost of their Scientific Atlantic converter boxes. This is an interesting issue because if we back away from the rate regulation concerns we have and talk about equipment compatibility and all the things we had there about programmable VCRs and being able to turn off and turn on those other issues, this new converter box has those functions. When we bring it into the rate context, the actual cost, as confirmed by Jay, for those enhanced function boxes was $1 more than they were authorized or could have charged effective July 14th. So I had to take into my consideration my estimates of the number of subscribers who have those boxes, the 3 months minimum, the July till October time frame, and the dollar per subscriber. And while that's not something that formally fits within the Form 1200 analysis, I took a broad approach and tried to look at what Sacramento Cable had filed, as well as what they've actually done to our subscribers. So how I have my recommendations, and I'm moving on now to page 6, come to you with an on-balance judgment. And that is, looking back to the chart that we had on the screen that's tabbed for you, your jurisdiction applies to the far left column. That is the basic service tier. And as you see, the total aggregate of those recommendations and adjustments at this point, including the remote issue, which we'll come back to, just rounds out at $100,000. It's my opinion and my recommendation that there are offsetting practices by Sacramento Cable and the marginal significance of what these would mean to subscribers. It's my recommendation that you take no action on Sacramento Cable Television's filings before you. That is, you do not order any of these isolated refunds or offsetting adjustments. In many cases, there may be a refund to one type of subscriber and an increase to another. We go through the cable company would go through a rather large accounting and disclosure problem, subscriber confusion, and in the end, it's less than 50 cents per subscriber. And I think that is reasonable, again, especially because of the actions to defer the increased equipment costs. However, and now we'll come down to this issue of the remote control count. I feel very strongly that this remote control count issue is significant. There's an open, and I believe Kevin will say, agreed upon dispute between us on how the rules are interpreted. The issue is, in applying and plugging a number into the forms, do we use Sac Cable's average remote controls deployed for October through the end of last year, and those represent actual physical units, remote controls, the things you push the buttons on in people's homes. Sacramento Cable argues that prior to October, their billing structure was such that they did not charge for the actual remote control, but they charged $3.75 for the capacity to have their system respond to a remote, and they gave the remotes to subscribers. That summarizes pretty much what the issue is. From a policy standpoint, I see it, and I put in here, I see it as a distinction but without a difference. And we need to get the FCC to resolve this. One, because...
Excuse me, we're going to ask FCC to resolve that?
Yes, that's the recommendation, that you file with the FCC, a request for them to resolve that issue, to tell us on what basis they want that decided. In Kevin's opinion, and I can see it quite clearly in the language, the regulation could be interpreted to provide for that. On the other hand, we know that the FCC developed these forms based on a regression analysis of the correlation between the number of remote controls and rates. They did that on a survey from a couple of years ago, and at that time, that distinction wasn't made. The impact to subscribers is a net $650,000, or approximately 30 cents a month, 25 to 30 cents a month over the course of the year. So my recommendation to you is to not take action on the less significant items before you, because they are offset by other savings Sacramento Cable has provided to subscribers, and for the other reasons I described: impact on consumer confusion, cost of implementing, and a general feeling that we're getting down at a very, very small level of detail. However, it is my recommendation that you direct staff to file with the FCC a complaint for clarification on this on this remote control issue. Again, the potential dollar impacts are, in our estimation, $640,000 plus dollars, and this also is a factor which will become part of this perfected form as a starting point for future references. As time goes on, the remote control can have a larger impact. Understand that, and I put it in my staff report, last October, Sacramento Cable redeployed converter boxes and lowered the rates on the remote control thing, whether it was the access or the physical unit, from $3.75 to 33 cents, and now I believe it's at 29 cents. The effect was that the number of remote controls out there went up dramatically. I've got it here in the numbers, but it was like 180,000 to 230,000 on average. That change in itself is significant, and that number, because of our sensitivity analysis, plays a very heavy role in the final rate determination. That's why I think it's a fair, reasonable recommendation to take this to the FCC, fill out the form, and formally provide the FCC the analysis, the report which we have before you. One of the products that Mr. Smith has provided us has been a recomputed filing of Sacramento Cable's Form 1200 on the assumptions and calculations and decisions he and we recommend. And it's staff's recommendation that you direct us to file that with the FCC tomorrow and not take any other refund or liability decisions at this time.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Foster, did the remote controls go up? And I don't recall exactly when the converter boxes were delivered.
All at the same time, sir. All last October.
So when the increase in remote controls were actually triggered by the converter box requirement?
I believe it's two factors. One was the converter box requirement, and I believe that to be in the range of 60,000 boxes placed out there. And then secondly, I believe there's a market factor. As the cost of the function dropped from $375 to $33, more people accepted remote controls as well. So there were two factors which increased the number of remote controls.
I see. For someone such as myself who has I've got one of those all-encompassing remote controls that I purchased at someplace.
Radio Shack or
wherever. So I have two of the other remotes, so I'm still paying for that. But the cable company's position is that I'm really paying for the accessibility to use the remote control, whether I buy it or get it from them or whatever.
That's exactly the cable company's, and correctly, position prior to October. In October, the Cable Act, what we did, what we were part of, changed that and said that the cable company, there's a timing issue here, but the cable company has to provide the remote capability at no cost and can only charge the actual cost on a 5-year depreciated basis of the unit. So what you were paying $375 a month for before using your own purchase remote now has no cost.
I understand. On an ongoing basis, though, it ought to be reasonable that the fee will be calculated on the number of converter boxes that are in the marketplace?
No, actually, if you look at the forms, I don't believe that converter boxes are part of the rate determining crunch. I believe.
Well, doesn't the number of converter boxes tell you how many?
Not necessarily, because people may have their own converter box. And again, what I want to point out is that, and this is very frustrating for us.
How do you get one of those?
How do you get
a converter box?
You have to pay $2.10 for the converter box.
But those are the things I got on top of the television. And you're saying, so my question is, when a television came cable ready, but then the cable company came along and required the converter box. So theoretically, everyone who now receives cable has some sort of cable or some sort of converter box?
That's correct. At the second tier of service.
Above the basic, above the minimum basic.
I understand. And so you ought to be able to determine that accessibility charge based upon the number of converter boxes out there, plus whatever the basic service is.
I would agree. Jay commented on this. There are many factors which I think would be logical in computing the rate, making the rate calculation. What's very hard for us, what's been very, in one sense, exciting, is to back into the regression analysis that the FCC did. And the FCC has determined that the number of remotes is something that drives the rate factor more strongly than the number of boxes. Yet we don't have the pieces that get us there.
Say it to me one more time.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'll say the same thing. What's reasonable is not necessarily what the formula that the FCC has proposed represents. The FCC did a mathematical analysis and they determined there was a relationship between a whole bunch of things and rates. One of the things was the number of remote units. And they say then, report on this form the number of remote units, and that goes through some arithmetic on the form and helps determine the rate. Locally, we don't really have a choice to say, well, we don't think remote units is reasonable, something else is more reasonable.
I understand. Let me just ask a kind of fundamental question. When you calculate the converter, the number of converter boxes and the number of remote control units are out there, plus the basic, do the numbers kind of come close together?
I can't answer that accurately because I don't really know the physical configuration of the converters in this system very well.
So I'm trying to figure out, from your standpoint, there's some question in your mind about the number of actual remote control devices that are out there.
Well, I think there's no question in my mind about the number of remote units that were entered on the records of Sacramento Cable. The question really relates to a definitional change. A period of time, they were units representing an access charge, and at another point in time, apparently they were physically leased units.
I see. Okay. And you can't kind of true those things up?
Well, our opinion is that there really is no distinction for the purposes of counting on the FCC form. Sacramento Cable's opinion is that the leased access should count basically as zero because that wasn't a remote rental. Therefore, for the part of the year where they leased access as opposed to leasing the unit, they counted zero. For the last 4 months of 1993, when they leased the units, they counted those. Since the average had gone way up at that period of time for reasons that we've gone over, they come out with a much higher number than we come out with.
I see what you're saying. I was just trying to help you prove your numbers.
Right. It's a definitional issue, though.
Okay.
We agree on the number, just not the definition which applies.
All right, Mr. Costanis.
Rich, then, I'm assuming the cable company is in agreement with your recommendation?
Let's hear from them.
All right.
They've had the draft about as long as you have.
Any other questions from the board? All right. Why don't we have Sacramento Cable come up?
Doesn't it all turn out to be the same number?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I'm Kevin Jones. I'm the controller of Sacramento Cable. Been here before you on previous occasions. I would like to say that I do in fact agree with Mr. Spasto's recommendations. We will in fact do those things that are suggested. We will submit the admitted filing within the time period requested. We'll adjust the unwired home rates as suggested is necessary. We will get the final audit report to the Commission within the 10-day period as well. And as Rich has indicated, we have essentially narrowed the open issues down to the one overriding issue, which is our agreement to disagree on how we should in fact deal with the remote count. As Jay mentioned, completing these forms is very much like completing your income tax return. You read the instructions exactly as stated, and you fill out the lines exactly as the instructions indicate. We feel we have done that. We do have a genuine disagreement as to what the intent of the FCC necessarily might have been, and we're merely asking for clarification. So to the extent that we agree on that and we can push that forward and get that resolved, I think most of the other issues have been taken care of at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Costanis.
Mr. Jones, would you prefer to resolve that final $800,000 issue here locally rather than going to the FCC?
600.
Whatever the count was.
It isn't 800,000.
Excuse me.
That's something we don't have any jurisdiction.
It's a definitional issue.
I don't believe that we have the jurisdiction to resolve that locally as it relates to the cable programming service rates.
It's on the right of your column.
Because that's within the FCC jurisdiction.
Okay. Okay.
Still a good question, don't you?
I wish we could resolve it, believe me.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Any other questions? No other questions?
The resolutions we have before us encompass all the recommendations and take into account all the issues that were brought up.
Yes, Ms. Collins, I'd like to add that there is one recommendation that's procedural, which is to rescind or terminate the accounting order we issued last December, which requires Sacramento Cable to keep additional records on their Form 393 filing. So we ceased that process as well. But yes, the resolutions before you reflect the staff report, and as well before you is the revised Form 1200 and series as prepared by Mr. Smith for filing with the FCC.
So it's both recommendations, both resolutions.
Both resolutions, 3 recommendations.
Okay, the resolutions are before us. There's been a motion by Collins, second by Mr. Cox. Do we have any public testimony on this item? Okay, seeing no public testimony and no more comments, would the Secretary please call the roll?
Cox?
Aye.
Pratt?
Aye.
Castanis?
Aye.
Collin?
Yes.
Yee?
Aye.
Toby Johnson? Dickinson?
Aye.
Panay?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Item number 3.
Mr. Chairman, members, this is a continuation item from your August 4th meeting. It's at your pleasure.
Okay, we have a closed session scheduled for this. If we could recess into closed session, and yes, Mr. Castanis.
Procedurally, we've made our grantees wait. That's item 4 on the agenda, 5. Couldn't we have our executive session at the end? And
okay, if there's no objection to changing the agenda at this point, seeing no objection, we'll move to the grantee item, item number 4. And if our grantees would come forward. Mr. Cooper, why don't you start? Any others there? Seeing no?
Ron Cooper, Executive Director at Access Sacramento. And just in our continuing efforts to keep the commission updated, I just wanted to brief you on several items.
Could we thank you first?
Oh.
Because we got a notice about the programming that's gone on in terms of the cooperation with the cable company, and is it Metro? And I know it switches to 3 different channels because we have a member of our family who is avidly switching among channels to try and catch those programs, and you cooperated in that, I understand. I just wanted to thank you.
Excellent.
I had other constituents who wanted to thank you also.
Great. And I'm glad to hear that there is a viewer, because I know it's difficult.
No, there were
to
several.
follow.
They were delighted.
But and we appreciate the cooperation as demonstrated with the access channels, government, education, and public, and also with Sacramento Cable, because I think it is a very important service that's being provided. Actually, my comments today touch on that a bit. I just wanted to reiterate again how much we appreciate the resources provided to us through the Commission and by way of Sacramento Cable that allowed for the producers to demonstrate their skills and win these awards. Also, very briefly, update this body on the progress of the property at 12th and C Streets. All work has been completed that we can do. The license for nonprofit bingo in partnership with about 15 other nonprofit organizations has been completed with the city process. And the status is one of the property owners themselves securing the funding necessary to do the build out of that property. But I hadn't reported back to the Commission in a while. I just wanted to update you on that. Also, some very important programming issues that actually do speak to the issue of Channel 18 between the hours of 5 and 7 that we've been using on C-SPAN 2. And I've talked, I don't see Brian here today, but I've talked with Brian Gruber, and apparently Sacramento Cable is talking with the providers of the shopping networks, and there may be, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I guess there may be some options in the future for C-SPAN 2 to find a home that you don't have to switch around. And what we'd like to do in our ideal situation is to, in consultation with our programming committee, expand the public access hours from a 6-hour block of first run, first scene programming every night, Monday through Friday, to an additional 2 hours from current 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. to 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. And the programming committee is excited about that because of 2 things. One is we have an abundance of programmers, more than can fit into that block of time. So we need to expand to include them. And in so doing, we will be able to offer planning commission meetings, city planning commission meetings live, 5:30 to 7 every Thursday. I know this has been a difficulty faced by the Commission and the Commission staff in the past in terms of the number of very important meetings that are going on. We have, via our radio producers, carried the City Planning Commission meetings on occasion now over several months. The Planning Commission loves it, would like to be on every week. Is that a familiar story? And what we're trying to do is to say, by expanding this programming time and dedicating the time, 5:30 to 7 on Thursdays, we'll be able to go live with that portion of the Planning Commission. And also go live via our radio link rather than going video. Much of what happens at meetings like the Planning Commission, certainly not here, but is discussions, and there's very little to see. At the Planning Commission meetings, we've been carrying via radio, and so we'd carry radio during that time block with our bulletin board service, because that's the only way radio is carried system-wide. When you see the bulletin board, you're hearing community radio. So that's the way we'd carry it system-wide, and we're also developing then a way of hooking live black and white still images via the computer out over the bulletin board while you're hearing the Planning Committee, showing images at the Planning Commission meeting. So what our hope is try and demonstrate a way of perhaps very cost effectively, with a minimum of technology and personnel, do some more of these meetings, but not necessarily sending a whole truck to do it. So we'll report back and keep Rich informed too in terms of what possibilities may open themselves up. And again, I submitted this for your information. There's some interesting collaborations continuing with Cosumnes River College, the County Office of Education, and now opening discussions with the County History and Science and Technology Center. We see a lot of common ground in the convergence of computer technology, the KCRA Channel 3 Film Library that's been stillborn since it was dedicated to Jim Henley over there, and so we're brainstorming about ways in which their center and our resources could work together and using the volunteer and technology available to us to make it in a cost-effective way. The other aspect I wanted to bring to your attention is several articles that I've just included. I know you have an abundance of issues here to face, but the one thing that I don't think we're doing in these monthly meetings is addressing some very important concerns about how local government is potentially being absolutely excluded from the discussions in Washington, the potential of an absolute disruption in terms of franchise fees based on current legislation. And so these are some articles. I don't want to plagiarize for those librarians on the panel, but it's from the Government Technology publication, very good publication, very timely articles. And so the articles I've included there speak to these kinds of issues, and I bring them to your attention, and particularly the county's article, Local Governments Losers on the National Information Infrastructure. These are extremely important concerns. Also, librarian uses of the NII. We're meeting with area-wide librarians to discuss how to share resources, how to include every citizen. And just in conclusion, very importantly, Senate Bill 2195, sponsored by Senator Inouye of Hawaii, is before the Senate. And this is the most expansive proposal yet offered, asking a 20% dedication of whatever the information delivery system for uses by public education, government, and nonprofit organizations. It is predictably opposed by the telephone industry, by the cable industry, by all commercial interests vying for a piece of NII, and so it's on the table, it's being discussed, and I would encourage this body to take a look at what 2195 is all about, and to really keep a finger on the pulse of these decisions being made in Washington. They're critical to all of our futures. Thank you. Okay. If there's any questions.
Any questions of Mr. Cooper?
Good report.
Okay,
Thanks, Ron.
well, thank you very much. I want to also, I'm not sure if he mentioned regarding his cooperation and work with our executive staff and Sacramento Cable on broadcasting the legislative hearings, the last days of the legislature before they adjourn.
That's what I was referencing.
Okay. All right.
Except you have to go to 3 different channels.
That's a problem, but
Only
at
the
least.
last days of the session, not the last days of the legislature.
So it was
Well,
the
it could be
last-
the last days of the
It
legislature.
was
You never
this
can
last
tell.
whole period that they're doing it.
Yeah, just the last days of the legislative session, as
Mhm.
Mr. Dickinson has pointed out, this year. The days of the legislature, I'm sure, are many to come.
I'm sure.
Well, I don't know if they stay in session too long. It'll be the last days of California, so.
All right. All right, so we will return. Shall we go through the franchisee license general status presentations as well? Why don't we bring them forward as well? And if there's no objection, why don't we have the franchise come forward?
I'm laughing.
Well, we've been doing a number of things community-wise, as we always do. One of the outstanding things we did in August was we worked with the Sacramento Food Bank Services on a gun turn-in program, and Roger Dickinson was there at all of our events, and kind of watched some amazing things happening, including sawed-off shotguns coming out of people's trunk, and you would not be yawning had you been there, Mr. Cox. It was pretty awesome to see, and some of the stories that came out of that were quite incredible. There was a grandmother who came and was talking to one of the police officers that was involved in one of the turn-in programs, and said that she just got tired of having this nasty gun. It belonged to her husband. She was a widow. It had been in her in the dresser drawer next to her bed, and she just decided one day, well, I'm going to take advantage of this program, and she took it back. And the boys had actually, her grandsons had actually found it and had picked it up and looked at it, and she had been explaining it to them and talking to them about being very careful with firearms. And so she turned this in, and when the police officers took it and spun the barrel, it was one of those old barrel kinds of guns, and they found that there was still a bullet in the chamber, and the grandmother just about had a heart attack right there. I mean, it's sort of a typical story of what happens, because there's so many accidental deaths that are involved in people just having guns in their home. So we had almost 160 guns off of the streets of Sacramento. If it saves one life, it was absolutely worth the effort that the sponsors and the food bank and Bass Tickets and the other people that joined in put into that, and also our local public officials. So we appreciate everybody's participation and support in that. The other thing that we're doing, of course, which has already been covered, is working with Access Sacramento in bringing expanded coverage of the California channel. There are, I guess, thousands of bills that are still sitting out there, and all kinds of last-minute maneuvering and things that could happen in these late-night sessions that people would otherwise really not be able to hear. So it is a really important time to watch government in action. And people are going to be tuning from Channel 18 from Access Sacramento to our channel at 7 o'clock, and then we're going to carry it into late-night sessions when people should be really good and tired, and there should be lots of really interesting things happening with our legislature. So that will be concluded hopefully within the next week or so. Everyone is sure looking forward to that, the legislatures at least. We're also going to have and host Access Sacramento at the State Fair. We are hosts of the international stage, and we also will be there for a few days in the commercial area. And Access Sacramento is going to be our guest one day, and they're going to show people through their truck and show the community how Access Television can work for them and what they can do with it. So we'll be real happy to be partners with them in that activity. One of the fantastic things I'm really looking forward to will be happening in September. I've already spoken with Rich about this and gotten some insights from him, but we're going to be working with HBO in helping them to promote a special on the life of Arthur Ashe, who is really a fantastic hero of our nation. And not very many people know about him, but he embodies some fantastic human characteristics that are really wonderful for young people. So what we're going to do with this project is work with Liz Rose at SECC and Jean Wilcox, and we're going to put together something we can involve the school children here with. And I've already talked to the school districts. They're very excited. I really wish I could give you details, but I have so many kind of important people, and I'm trying to put together at the same place at the same time. I'm afraid it will be a curse if I say their names. But we are hoping to make a big splash, let people know who Arthur Ashe was and what he stood for, and we'll let you know the details of that as it kind of unfolds. Finally, I want to let you know that Wayne is very sorry he couldn't be with us here today. He's on his way back to Cincinnati to fetch his family. He is, after getting over the incredible shock of real estate prices in California, they were able to focus on...
Too low?
Well, I think it had a great deal to do with the ratio of the size of land to the price. And after kind of getting acclimatized to that, they really focused on how warmly and wonderfully everyone here has welcomed them. They were so incredibly impressed. I guess they had the impression it would be very difficult to walk into California, walk into Sacramento as newcomers. And I said, gosh, Wayne, I think all of us are newcomers in California. And so it's a little bit easier to assimilate coming here, and people warmly welcome and give you a chance and open their arms, and he has definitely noticed that and been extremely pleased. So he's really looking forward to being back after Labor Day, and he will be here with his family, his furniture, and our future in his hands.
Good.
That's about all I have to say, except to thank you very much for recognizing our employees earlier in the day.
Well, thank you, and thank you for
Any questions?
having them come along. Any questions from the commission? No questions at all.
All right.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for the participation with Channel 9 and your participation.
It's our pleasure. We're very happy we could put that together.
Yeah.
And I also want to thank Rich for actually bringing that suggestion to us and helping us to make that possible.
Well, good. Well, I'll be over in the halls myself, so I won't be availing myself of that.
You can bet we'll be watching you.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, fortunately, the cameras aren't out in the halls.
Well, we haven't
So
told
you
you
won't
about
see-
there's hidden cameras.
There are
I'm
hidden
sure,
cameras.
yeah.
Well, then you'll see me beg for votes then, if that's what you want to see, and see how pitiful it is. I was talking to another colleague the other day, and he says, isn't this just humiliating? And I said, no, not really. It goes on at City Council and Board of Supervisors every day.
There are a number of us who would pay to see that.
Oh, not like that, Josh.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, you
Begging.
can't. Mike,
No
the City
begging.
Council, never here. Josh.
Never here? Okay, well, I'll have to
Begging
come
there
over here.
too, huh?
All right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll move on back to item number 3, and we'll go into closed session, executive session at this point, and we'll be back. Stay tuned or go into it.